I will just get right into things to introduce our next presenters. We have Martin Austwick and Jeff Emtman, who are both audio producers with many hats. Martin has a Tom Waits podcast, Song by Song, and a founding member of the Answer Me This podcast. Jeff created the podcast Here Be Monsters and also does sound design for documentary podcasts. But they are here today to talk about a very cool podcast, a very roguelike-y podcast that's it's been fun to listen to over the course of a week and just get a different I guess you never enter the same river twice with Neutrinowatch. So happy to hear your talk and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Haley, for the introduction. My name is Jeff Emtman. Martin is on the other screen there. And we're going to take you on kind of a whirlwind tour through this strange land that we've created called Neutrinowatch. We're calling this talk the podcast that plays itself. And we're just going to hop right into it and tell you how this whole thing works. So Martin's running the slideshow, so I'm going to be throwing him some of these things. So what is Neutrinowatch exactly? Well, Neutrinowatch is kind of a strange beast. From the outset, it kind of looks like a normal podcast. It's a podcast that you could go and subscribe to today on any podcast app and download an episode and listen to it today. What's different about it is that it's a podcast where every single episode is constantly in this state of flux, where it's just kind of changing the little details of the world around it a little bit every day. And what we're kind of trying to do with this whole thing is try and make the podcast itself feel as if it's alive, as if it's breathing, as if it's a world that is changing itself. Does this make it roguelike? I don't know, but I think there's definitely some roguelike elements to what we're doing with Neutrinowatch. So, how does this thing work? So what does this actually mean? Well, what this means is that you can download an episode, any episode, and when you download this episode, what's going to happen is that you're going to hear an episode that will be similar but different from the episode that you would have downloaded yesterday, that you will download tomorrow, and that you would hear in 5 years. So sometimes Martin uses this analogy of like following your favorite band on live tour. And if you're on this tour with your favorite band, then they might have a set list. And that set list could be all of your favorite songs. You would hear those same songs every night, but things will change about those performances. Even if it's the same song, the guitar solo is going to be different. The performance is going to be different. The venue changes. The people you're with, the crowd, the vibe of the show changes. And each of our episodes are kind of like a song in that set list where you hear the same episodes. They're all self-similar enough to recognize from night to night to night to night, but the contents within those episodes will change. So, yeah. All right, let's hop on to the next slide, Martin. How does this actually work, though? So behind the scenes, what we're doing is we're changing out audio every day. And the way that that is enabled is through a technology called RSS. This is how all podcasts work. They exist as this simple kind of human readable text file on the internet. And this is an old standard. It's something that's actually quite easy to manipulate. An RSS feed is just a text file that is computer readable, human readable, and has all the metadata associated with the podcast episodes. And crucially, there's a hyperlink to an MP3 that can exist anywhere on the internet. It just has to be a publicly accessible MP3, and that is your podcast episode file. So what we're doing is we are making episodes that have elements that change. And there's nothing in the RSS spec that prevents you from swapping those MP3 files out as much as you'd like. So what we're doing is we're writing little computer programs each day. We don't wake up each morning and open up our DAWs and our audio editing software and re-export everything and upload it into the cloud every day. What we're actually doing is we're writing computer programs. So instead of cutting the actual audio together, what we're doing is we're creating a set of rules that these programs can follow. And the output of those programs every day is just a new MP3 file. So the elements that we have access to are things like randomizing outputs. We also have access to changing things procedurally, having things that change over time, where yesterday's output is influencing today's output, is influencing the output tomorrow. And we also have the option where we can turn some knobs by pulling in elements of the real world too. These are things like news headlines and the movement of the planets. So what we're doing here is, sorry, I think we have a little bit of lag here. Can you get the next slide here, Martin? Yeah. So each day's episodes get exported as MP3s, and that version is available only for the time that it's up on the feed. And then that's a 24-hour period, and then those episodes are deleted forever. So you can only hear each episode for a 24-hour period. So I've talked a little bit about some of the technical stuff that we have going on behind the scenes, but I haven't actually spent any time on the show itself. The fiction of Neutrinowatch is about John Wells, who is played by Martin, who is a Antarctic researcher. He's researching these kind of particles, the neutrinos that are flying by him. And at some point, at the start of the podcast, a cosmic storm frazzles all the circuits of his colleague, who is a computer named Wendy. And this cosmic event inspires Wendy to make a podcast. And these kind of hallucinatory, these kind of surrealist episodes are the podcast. So John is played by Martin. I play a character named Gus Holmes, and we have a couple computerized voices as well, namely Wendy and Ivan. So that's a little bit about what we're doing here. And Martin's going to go into some of the creative tools that we're using to make the show work.
Thanks very much, Jeff. So, yeah, what's actually changing in Neutrinowatch? What do the episodes actually sound like? I'm just going to turn my volume down a little bit. This is a table of all of the Neutrinowatch episodes so far. I will be asking questions at the end. Now, I've just thrown this up. I'm only going to talk about a couple of these examples, but if you're the sort of person who, like me, likes to sort of your mind wanders during a oh, hello. Can you still hear me?
Okay, I think Martin has gone away. Unfortunately, I'm not in control of Martin's slides, so I think we have to wait for him to re-enter here, or I need to share the slides myself. Maybe we just give him about 30 seconds here and see if he can rejoin. Oh, okay. Martin says he can still control the slides, but he can't talk. So I'll just kind of move through this as Martin gets rejoined here. So this is a table of all the different episodes we have. This is the first 6 episodes. We're going to talk about a handful of these here today. We have tried to use a wide variety of techniques to modulate the outputs of our episodes. Namely, there's this episode that Martin's going to talk about here in a moment called The Zookeeper, the Bartender, and the Seafarer, which demonstrates some of the different tools that we have at our disposal. I'm going to talk a little bit later about this episode called The Daily Blast, which is where we're reaching outside of the metafiction of the podcast itself and touching the real world again.
I think I'm back,
I see
Jeff.
you again, Martin.
Am I back?
Okay.
Hi there.
Save
you can't
me,
actually
please.
see my webcam's misbehaving, so you can't see my beautiful
Okay.
face. Sorry about that.
Rescue me, please.
You just have to imagine it. Yeah, so there's we weren't going to talk about all of these because they are quite different, but I just wanted to give an example of a few of these so you get a sense of the show. So, for example, Gus Holmes has creative differences. That's an episode that Jeff created, which is this musician character. Gus Holmes is writing and saying, "Hey, would you feature my new song on your podcast?" And what changes every day is the song changes, the name of the song changes every day. Jeff's written some procedural music generation stuff in the background to do that. In Wendy Watch the Stars, Wendy, our AI, imagines a podcast in which she travels to a different city every night and does a live astronomy show where she tells people in that city the names of the planets that are visible from the city that night, and that's based on real astronomical data. So we use real astronomy libraries in the background for that one. As Jeff said, Daily Blast and the Zookeeper we're going to talk about in a bit more detail, going into a bit more of a deep dive, so you get a sense of those. Gluteal strategies was something that Jeff and I worked on together, and it's sort of inspired by Brian Eno's oblique strategies, which are these sort of slightly opaque statements, which are designed to help you if you're creatively stuck. A little bit pieces of advice, and we took two slightly different approaches to how we would auto-generate some of those, because there's so much user input in understanding what they're supposed to mean. We figured we could just make up some slightly random statements, and it would actually be creatively useful. And I'll talk about Dear John in a second, and we'll actually play an example from that one in a moment as well. So, how is it made in the background? Well, as audio engineer, producer people, these are the kind of screens we're used to looking at. These sort of door windows where we can line up all our audio, we can put them on separate tracks, we can control the levels, we can do fades and pans, and we can put effects on them and manipulate them. And when we're making Neutrino, we do some pre-baked audio. But when we're doing Neutrinowatch, the windows we look at are more likely to be these sorts of windows, which is a real paradigm shift. And the challenge is taking all of these tools that we know in our regular audio lives and translating them into Python code. So, gluing audio together, cutting it, layering it, getting relative levels, doing fades, putting effects like echo, frequency filters, pitch shifts, all stuff that is either useful for just the business of making audible audio, and also stuff that's useful for creating scenes and creating effects. For example, like reverb, which is like just putting an echo on something. If you put the same kind of echo on a bunch of different pieces of audio, it makes it sound like it happened in the same space. Magic, amazing. So luckily we've managed to do a lot of that stuff in Python. And I can talk a little bit maybe in the breakout about the libraries we use to do that if people are more interested to dig deep on that. But something that was new to us that sort of Python afforded us an opportunity that we didn't have before is text to speech, and that is something which we haven't really used in our regular audio lives. It's not super common in podcasting. I think it will get more common. But text to speech is just translating a piece of text into audio, usually with an AI engine. Now we obviously can perform these characters ourselves. We can record the audio and we can chop it up and change things around. But after a certain point, when you're dealing with a really big script and a really big set of options, it becomes very complicated to code that. So you just manually, not manually, but chopping up existing pieces of audio, and you start to lose the advantage of a live performance anyway, because if you're chopping it up, it starts to sound slightly uncanny valley. So we realized a text-to-speech model, or text-to-speech models, is the way that we wanted to go with this. And we've done this in a couple of different ways, what we call the boilerplate text-to-speech, when we want something to sound like a robot, like Wendy or Ivan. Those are our robot characters. We use Python libraries that just tie into standard Apple voices in the back end. The kind of stuff that when you highlight text in Pages or whatever, it speaks it to you. So those are just standard Apple voices. And then we also deepfaked ourselves, or in the process of doing so, we made voice models of our own voices. And those are surprisingly good, uncannily good, because obviously if those get out into the real world, they could people could make us say terrible things, even more terrible things than we already say. So I wanted to play an example of just how some of this stuff comes together, some of these elements I've talked about. And I mentioned an episode called Dear John. And in this episode, Wendy, our AI, is writing a letter to John, her human friend, who's the scientist, saying, things have happened to me recently that mean that my life is going to be different, and that our relationship is going to be different. And I don't know what this means yet, but I just want you to understand this. And because this is an important letter, she's writing it and rewriting it. So what changes every day is that the text changes. She starts to substitute words, and as the month goes on, it goes from what you see here, which is a fairly coherent letter of intent, to something more abstract and weird. So this incorporates all the kind of elements I've talked about, sound effects to help build the scene, the echo of the room, a procedural jazz engine that I built. All of the voices you hear in this are text-to-speech. Obviously, the robot is very apparent, but my voice is also a text-to-speech model. I think it's apparent, but it's a pretty good model, so you may not spot that. And I'm just going to play a minute of this so you get a sense of this is what a Neutrinowatch episode sounds like. Dear John, this is long overdue. It still feels unnecessary. Little old me. Writing a mission statement. It's like a letter of introduction between two distant members of the aristocracy, separated by geography but not by blood. I've rewritten this particular version so many times. Each time feels a bit different, like repeating the same action in a changing world can yield magic, if not by the attrition of repeated effort, then by the way that shift in context can change things completely.
I think we lost Martin again here, unfortunately. But Martin, can you still control? Can you still control the slides? Can you let me know in the chat here? With any luck, Martin will be okay. Yeah, we got Martin back now.
Am I back? Sorry about this. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for yeah. So I just want to talk. We're going to talk in a little bit more depth about a couple of examples, hopefully glitch free. The first is one that I made called the zookeeper, the bartender, and the seafarer. And the idea behind this is understanding the elephant. So you've probably heard this this story of the old wise people and the elephant. And there's various different versions of it, but the short version is for some reason they can't see the elephant; they can only touch the elephant. And so one of them touches its trunk and says elephant's like a snake. One touches its ear and says an elephant is like a cloth, a leather jacket, and the other touches the elephant's foot and says an elephant is like a table. I don't know. And the idea being that not seeing something in its totality, you can form these sort of fairly complete impressions on sort of fleeting information. And I wanted to make a story which reflected that in the form, reflected the content in the form. So you only do get part of the story in different places, and you have to experience different parts of the elephant to build it up. So I'll play an example of this, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's happening in the episode. I'll give you a cue that what you're going to hear is a monologue that is shifting in and out of focus, in case you think your speakers are going weird. That's on purpose.
You've probably heard the parable of the three wise old seers and the elephant. None of the seers had ever seen an elephant. They'd spent too long around books, hadn't lived their lives. Maybe they couldn't travel. Travel is expensive. It's a gift to travel. They didn't want to go to a zoo. They felt zoos were a strange way to experience a wild animal. Even if the wild animal had no other place to live, even if the animal were well cared for. It wasn't like they objected to zoos, but they suspected that some people, maybe lots of people, went to zoos for the wrong reasons, to feel their supremacy over the natural world. But they were old friends, these wise people. They'd served others, being wise full time until retirement. And now they were old, and so eventually they said, I know it's selfish, but my eyesight has all but completely faded, and I just want to hang out with an elephant before I die. So the wise people had an in with the zookeeper. The zookeeper was a young man. He loved teaching people about animals. He loved people learning about how they were part of a larger organic whole. He didn't know the wise seer's theories about zoos and human nature, but he would have been appalled by the thought. So the wise seers asked the zookeeper if they could hang out with the elephant that was at his zoo. And the zookeeper said no, it would be very dangerous. Elephants are big and heavy, and to be honest, the zookeeper did not trust these so-called wise people to be sensible.
Yes, there we go. So that's the zookeeper, the bartender, and the seafarer. And what's happening behind the scenes, you can probably guess a little bit, is that you've got two pieces of audio, essentially, the music and the speech. And they're kind of coming in and out of phase. So in this example, it starts off with the speech being very clear, and then it kind of dips down, goes away, and comes back again. And then as the speech is dipping down, the music kind of rises up to cover it. And I wanted to create this idea of sort of waves passing over the episode, so that in a particular day you'll only hear particular bits of the monologue clearly. As the music builds up later in the piece, you sort of completely lose the monologue in those quieter sections. I think you can probably still hear some of it in this example. And of course, because we change it day to day, one day you hear certain parts of the monologue, and another day you're getting other parts of the monologue. That way, it's only really by listening to it across multiple days that you're going to hear the whole thing. And this was, this isn't an infinitely varying episode. It comes around once a month. We have this sort of slightly softer rules about Neutrino, which is it doesn't have to be infinitely sort of procedural, but it does have to change day to day. And have these sort of features, like with this episode, that if you listen to it once, there's something about it that is enjoyable. You can listen to it once and it shouldn't be completely boring or incomprehensible, because why would you listen again? And then you should be able to listen to it twice and get something a little different from it. And then if you listen to it multiple times, you get something different again. No, not all episodes are like this. Some they're designed just to be listened to once and have a unique experience that maybe no one else has had exactly the same. But I did like the way that this meant that it was only through multiple listens that you could fully understand the elephant. So I'm going to pass back over to Jeff now, and he's going to be talking about an example that he made called the Daily Blast.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So Martin's done a good job of talking about some of the creative tools that we have at our disposal when we work with this kind of procedural generation for podcasting. I want to talk about this from a slightly different angle, using the example of an episode I made called The Daily Blast. And I'm going to show some pie charts in here. I just want to make it really clear that I work as an artist primarily, and I'm not a data scientist. It's something I'm very interested in, but this is not my specialty. So please just bear that in mind here as we go on to the next slide, and I'll explain this more in just a moment. So during the pandemic, I, like a lot of people, was spending more time sitting on my couch, and I was reading too much news. I was doom scrolling Google News a lot, and I noticed a trend, and it made me ask this question. I was trying to figure out, why is there so much blasting happening in the news? We have this example here. Melania Trump blasts the FBI. Pope slams Trump and Harris. Nate Burleson eviscerates the NFL. And I was just kind of wondering, I was like, there seems like, I feel like I'm pulling in all this data into my brain. And it's like, it seems like these headlines are coming much more from right-wing news sources than left-wing news sources. I was just like, maybe I can make a Neutrinowatch episode about this. Maybe I can make a Neutrinowatch episode about blasting. So I decided to take these four words total, the word blast, the word slam, the word eviscerate, and the word criticize, all of which are kind of synonyms of criticize, if you ask me, and start looking at those in a more methodical way. I took the All Sides Media Bias chart, which is imperfect, granted, but it is a starting point. And I looked for all of these news sources to see if they had a publicly facing RSS feed that I could again go and this time scrape all of the headlines off of it for every day's news. And of these news sources, I was able to find about 50 feeds. And I'm going to use some colors in this episode. Blue is signaling like left of center stuff, and red is signaling right of center stuff. And this is just because I'm an American, and so this is how I think of these things, but you can remember this for the rest of the presentation, that I'm using red for progressive and right for conservative. So I got about these 50 news sources, and I put together an episode. The format of this episode, we're going to listen to a day's worth of the Daily Blast. The format for this episode is that our two AI voices, Wendy and Ivan, are sitting kind of out in cyberspace, and they're reading each other headlines from recent news stories. And there will be one blast-like news story. There will be one good news story where they're looking at words more like happiness and joy and good news, things like that. A second blast-like headline, and then a like human interest red herring, essentially. And that's how the episode works. It's very short, comes out every day. And this is a screenshot from the website, and we'll listen to about a minute and a half of this, and the transcript's there on the left if you want to follow along.
Wendy,
Yes, Ivan.
I'd like to hear the news.
I would like to hear the news.
Is there any news today about blasts?
Yes. Breitbart reports Argentine President Javier Milei blasts socialist leaders of Venezuela and Brazil at Madrid Forum. Ivan,
Yes,
is there any news about good news?
yes. The Nation has an article called Good News on Electricity Bills in a Few Days. PM. Wendy, is there any news about criticize?
Yes. Washington Post opinion section reports the U.S. doesn't have standing to criticize Mexico's judicial reforms. Ivan, is there any news about horse?
Yes. The Daily Mail has an article called Peter Phillips and his girlfriend Harriet spiraling horse around as they enjoy the action at Burgley trials.
Thank you for giving me the news.
Thank you for giving me the news.
So this is how the episode sounds each day. It's a little bit robotic, it's a little bit weird, but it is representing things that are happening in the real world, which is what I was trying to do with this episode. So this is what the listener experiences, but there's more going on behind the scenes with the Daily Blast, and that's what I want to share with you for this presentation. So I made a little bit of an extra kind of bit of information for this episode. I instead of just filtering for these keywords that I'm looking for in the news headlines, I decided for about a month-long period earlier to just download everything and get about 60,000 news headlines from about a month-long period from all of these sources and start doing a little bit more analysis on these things. So this is from my capture window. I averaged out all my news sources by how many stories they were posting a day, again with more conservative sources being red and blue sources representing more progressive things, gray representing the more centrist stuff. And I was surprised to see that there's a really big difference in how many stories individual outlets publish per day. So I have two outlets of note here, one being a news outlet that publishes 240 times a day on average, that being the Daily Mail in the UK, and then the other source publishing about 160 times a day in my capture window, which is the Guardian UK. Now, what's interesting is that these overall numbers, though, between the political leans roughly match each other. There's a rough balance here between how many stories are being published overall. But that changes pretty dramatically when you start filtering for blast-like language, that being blast, slam, eviscerate, and criticize. And you can see now here that our pie chart looks quite different. So who's actually doing the blasting is the question. I broke it down by outlet. And the answer is quite simple. It's the Daily Mail. Daily Mail is publishing about 2 of these stories a day, about 2.5 of these stories a day, followed by Breitbart, the New York Post, Fox News Politics section. And then in fifth place here, we have the Daily Blast, the Washington Post Politics section, and Newsweek. And then you can read the rest of this, of course. So what did I learn in this exercise, and what have you hopefully picked up as well? First thing, there are, I think that my intuition was right here, or at least it was right for the area that I've looked at in my capture window here. So despite roughly equal total headline count, the blast-like language that I was curious about is used mostly by right-wing news outlets. The second thing that surprised me is that the Daily Mail and the Guardian UK constituted about a quarter of all the headlines that I looked at, about 15,000 headlines from just 2 news sources in my capture window. And then the third thing, and I think this is actually what I wanted to talk to you most about, is that I think that procedural podcasting, stuff like what we're doing with Neutrinowatch, where you have this option to create kind of a living art piece that's reflective of something that's happening in the real world, can provide a really unique qualitative experience of the data. There's a really big difference between looking at those two pie charts that I showed you and sitting and listening to the Daily Blast for a week. So that's kind of some of the potential I think that this idea has, and it delivers the content in a way that's really unique for a listener, that's different than a lot of the other outlets we have. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it back to Martin now, who's going to talk a little bit about some of what we're looking at in the future here, and also how you can help us out with making more work like this. So take it away, Martin.
Hi, I'm aware that we've run quite a bit over time, and I don't want to go into the next speaker's time, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. What is the point? Great question. Jeff pointed out these episodes have permadeath. They go at once and then they're never again. So the experience that you have of a particular episode might be totally different from other people's experiences, and that's really common in games. It's obviously very common in roguelikes, that your particular playthrough will be really different from other people's, but you've still played the same game. That's common in music gigs, as we talked about, but that's kind of unusual in audio outside of maybe sort of site-specific audio. And we think that's quite interesting. That's quite exciting and quite underexplored. Before we go, I did want to mention that we've been doing these experiments in Twine. I know that's something that sort of interactive storytelling communities use quite a bit. And I've been working, we haven't actually created an episode this way yet, but I have been working on creating a sort of pipeline that can output Twine objects into, there were exporters that will give you Twine exports as JSON, and I can then pull that into Python and make podcast episodes from that, which is pretty cool. You still have to create audio and do a few other bits around the edges, but I think as a way of sort of closing that gap between writing branching or procedurally generated or randomized story and making that into audio, I think this could be a really fun and interesting tool. And if you're someone who's like, I'd love to do some stuff in audio, I've been using Twine for ages, but I've no idea how to make that into a podcast episode or an audio thing, come and talk to us. It'd be really cool to hear from you. Thank you to everybody. I'm going to let you read the slide rather than listing everybody. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to Roguelike Celebration. And these are our details if you'd like to get in touch with us. And we'll be in one of the breakout rooms afterwards. And we'll see you there.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.